last genetic mutation, again, gene mutation, is called Huntington's. Again, it is a gene that is found on chromosome 4. You and I have the normal gene in that spot. Huntington's is actually a repeat that we'll take a look at later on. Some of the main symptoms of Huntington's disease is a decline in cognitive function, so thinking. There's also physical impairments like in the gait or walking of the individual, and also some behavioral problems. At this point, there is no cure for the genetic disease. It does affect men and women, so it is not what we call sex-influenced or sex-linked. 12,000 people in the United Kingdom live with Huntington's. That is similar to what is in the United States. This is a dominant disorder or a dominant gene, so a parent that has it has a 50% chance of passing the gene on to each child. One thing different about this dominant disorder is the onset of symptoms isn't until the age of 35 to 60. So usually by that time, the person, again, let's say if you don't have symptoms, you go ahead and get married, you have children, and then the symptoms start to set in. So again, where some of the other disorders, you have symptoms or characteristics of the disorder early on, this is what we call late onset of symptoms, which makes it a more devastating disorder. Who suffers? Again, it's equally inherited, so it's not sex-linked. Again, the symptoms typically don't become evident until you're in your 40s or 50s. Current estimates in the United States, 1 in 10,000 people. Okay, this graphic shows you sort of the age of onset. I'm going to go ahead and read that little paragraph. Motor impairment, which basically means nerves to muscle, associated with Huntington's disease is rare in children and adolescents. People who carry the gene mutation that causes the condition develop symptoms on average at around the age of 40. And you can see that is the highest bar, 35 to 39. Huntington's disease can strike later in life, but this is also rare. So the majority of people have their onset of symptoms between 30 and 55 to 60. There is what we also call juvenile Huntington's, and it can be diagnosed before the age of 21. Those affected have at least 50 copies of that CAG nucleotide repeat, and we'll talk about that here in just a second, the repeats. So Huntington's disease, again, it's relatively rare, 1 in 10,000 people. It is caused by a point mutation. It causes the breakdown of nerves in parts of the brain, and that mutation produces a type of protein called Huntington, therefore the name Huntington's disease. Eventually, the Huntington's disease may that person may lose the ability to feed himself or herself, to dress him or herself, and basically they have an unsteady gait and involuntary movements of the head, trunk, and limbs, and a lot of times it's referred to as the Huntington's dance because of their unsteady gait or walk and movement. It is one of the genetic diseases that there is a test that can be taken. So even if you don't show symptoms, you can have a test to see if you carry that dominant gene. Again, it is a dominant trait. These are some of the early stages and symptoms. Early stage might have some thinking ability or mobility, may include some mood swings, involuntary twitches, lack of coordination, maybe dropping things or running into things when they walk. Some of the mid-stage as the disease progresses, concentration and short-term memory loss may occur. The most common involuntary movement, though, is what they call chorea, or walking, speaking, and swallowing abilities deteriorate as well. And then eventually the late stage, the person is unable to care for him or herself, and death will usually follow from complications such as choking, infection, or heart failure. Okay, so again, it is that autosomal dominant disorder. It's carried on chromosome 4. The defect is in sequence of DNA on chromosome 4 in which several base pairs are repeated over and over and over again. The codon, or the bases that are repeated, are CAG, and it codes for the amino acid glutamine. Normally in you and I, there are less than 40 repeats in a row of the protein. But in the mutated genes, there are more than 40, and we call that the mutated versions of Huntington's. And when that mutated molecules build up in the brain cells, that's what eventually will cause death for the person or for the individual. This shows you sort of the gene without Huntington's under, again, 35 repeats of that CAG, 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 and it produces a healthy neuron. Genes with Huntington's disease, you have increased repeats of that CAG, 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 which causes a mutation in the Huntington protein, which causes breakdown of the nerves in the brain. This shows you a pedigree for Huntington's. You can see all of the individuals that are affected. You can see that it is a dominant trait. Every generation has one, and you can see as it goes through a family where a large percentage of the individuals in the family acquire or have Huntington's. This shows you sort of a family tree that was on a website. You can see that the lady that was on the website is Amy, and you can see that her father on her mother's side had Huntington's, and her sister and a brother have Huntington's. And she has a family. The children there are Amy's kids or daughters and sons. And this shows you, whoops, let's see. It says that the oldest daughter asked Dad, how will I ever marry or have children? Or that the oldest son has said, Dad, what's the point of school? I'm just going to sit sick like Mom and forget everything. Or that Amy's third-born son has said, I think I'm going to get the disease since I'm in the middle. The youngest two don't know what lies ahead. They do not understand the disease. They just know that Mom is sick. If you'll go ahead and watch the video clip CBS with Chris Furby, it shows his and his mother and sort of some of the information of others that are affected by Huntington's. Okay, there is testing for Huntington's. It does present people with Huntington's with several dilemmas. Let's say if you have the test and you test positive, do you decide to go ahead and have children? Do you decide to go ahead and marry? Or tell your spouse what lies ahead? Also, do you test, if you've already had children, do you test your children or your grandchildren? And so there are a lot of emotional issues that come along with a positive or with a negative test. So testing, again, the anxiety comes with living with a 50% risk. If you're decided you don't want to be tested for Huntington's, you know your mother has it or your father has it, then you also have some anxiety living with with not testing. So again, these are some of the things that testing with having Huntington's in your family can have a great impact on that family. Hopefully you've enjoyed this information on Huntington's.